Hiya, Facebook peeps. Okay, so I didn't want Sue to bring out the crying little smiley face, so I'm going to do part 2 of Captivated. And I'm taking it from where I left off in the first chapter. So here's the second scene of Captivated. There might be a cat or two that comes by, so hopefully they won't disturb us. Anyways, here we go. There's one. Hi, Nico. Bye, Nico. Juliet continued to take in her surroundings while Tanner was out getting lunch. At least she thought it was lunch. Time was a bit elusive at this point. She wasn't sure how long she'd been in La La Land. The last thing she remembered was a tiny prick on her neck. The moment she'd witnessed the crime, she made a beeline for her grandmother's remote cabin in the mountains. Granny was off on one of her backwoods camping adventures with her best friend Sally, so Juliet thought she could hide out there for a few days to consider her options. Juliet wasn't thinking clearly because she hadn't held much hope that anyone would believe her. Being the town snoop didn't endear you to the right people. Perhaps if she'd been more rational at the time, she might have tried to contact the FBI or some other law enforcement agency. There had to be evidence of the crime that would back up her story, but Tanner had somehow tracked her down, and she never got the chance to tell anyone. She looked around the cabin and thought she might be in an old abandoned hunting cabin. She stretched her neck to the side and tried to look out the dirt-encrusted windows. Juliet shuddered as she focused on all the dirt. It made her skin crawl. Trees, and more trees were all she saw as she peered through the glass. She suspected she was still somewhere in the mountains, maybe not far from her grandmother's place, and her heart sank. With so many secluded cabins located around the Cascade Mountains, hiding someone was a piece of cake. It was a hermit's paradise. Most of them didn't show up on any map or census document, which was how the local folks wanted it. Mind your own effing business was the motto around here. She'd heard her grandmother say it often enough for her to recognize the ingrained philosophy of the mountain folk. Juliet started to squirm as she realized she needed to go to the bathroom and glumly noted that once that thought was in her head, she wouldn't be able to erase it, unable to think of anything else but her need to urinate. She tilted her head, looked up at the ceiling, and in an effort to sidetrack her brain, started singing an old song from one of her all-time favorite musicals. The light, airy sound of her alto voice floated in the room. A loud guffaw filled the small cabin as Juliet heard a creaking sound. She turned her head to the door and found Tanner's laughing eyes. "You're singing I Whistle a Happy Tune from The King and I? How cliche," Tanner continued to laugh. "Nice voice, by the way." "Thanks, I think. Do you think I could use the washroom? I really have to pee." Tanner blushed. Shoot, I didn't think about that. Look, if I cut off your zip ties and let you use the washroom, will you be compliant and come back? I would sincerely hate to have to hunt you down like a wild animal. I'm still considering my options, and if you take away my other alternatives, I will have no choice but to kill you. I'd really rather not make that decision." Juliet nodded so vigorously that she felt like she might be mistaken for one of those bobbleheads. A part of her decided to adhere to Tanner's request because she was petrified that Tanner would track her down and without remorse follow through with her threat. Yet a bigger part of her was curious why Tanner had killed that man in cold blood. She had to find out, even if it meant risking her life. Tanner dumped the bag and 2 large drinks from the sandwich shop on the scratched and dented oak table off to the right and pulled out a lethal-looking knife. In a couple of swift movements, she'd sliced through the open zip ties, holding Juliet's wrists together. When Tanner bent to undo the ties that secured each ankle to the chair, Juliet had a notion to try to kick her in the head, take her gun, and run for her life. "What the hell? I'm not some kind of badass Rambo. Stop thinking like that." Juliet shook her head, and she knew she didn't want to try to escape. Something told her this entire mess might have a reasonable explanation, and she didn't want to hurt Tanner. Tanner looked up into Juliet's face and narrowed her eyes. "Good choice, Juliet. I really have a hard head, and I doubt you'd have been able to disable me long enough to escape. Just so you know, I'm an expert in several different types of martial arts. I'd have anticipated your move well before you had a chance to execute it. Juliet felt the bindings loosen. Shit, Tanner, did you just cut those zip ties without looking? You could have sliced my ankle. Juliet smacked her hand across her mouth. Smart move, Einstein. Do not irritate your jailer. Tanner shrugged. I knew where your ankles were. You only risked getting sliced if you tried some asinine move to escape. You're smarter than I suspected, or you're too much of a chicken shit to try. Either way, I'm glad you picked the right option. I am not chicken shit, but I will admit to wanting to understand why, Juliet argued. Why what? Juliet couldn't help her look of incredulity. Oh, that little incident earlier? I have my reasons. I suppose it depends on your perspective, whether they're legitimate or not. Okay, that's the end of part 2, and hope you like it.